but they're not. There's a huge overlap. And so the classic drugs that we used to give for immunosuppression for patients undergoing organ transplant, solid organ transplant, and to prevent graft versus host disease, a lot of those drugs actually show utility in the hematologic and the solid tumor malignancies. And so you'll see a lot of overlap with those drugs. Here's the objectives. You can read those by yourself. So why would we even go to immunosuppression in the beginning of an oncology lecture? Well, I want you to kind of re-examine some of the pathological processes that we've covered, over the last 2 years or so of your curriculum. And there's a lot of parallels with wound healing. And so normal homeostasis that involves the healing of a wound, a superficial wound, involves an immune reaction. It involves some capillary angiogenesis, at least at the micro level. There's bona fide leukocyte migration. And these three processes that are part of basically normal homeostasis are actually the main players in early phases of cancer initiation. Okay, and so there's a really great article that I read when I was in grad school called Cancer, Wounds That Fail to Heal. And so if you think of tumors as wounds that don't heal, that's really kind of a radical approach. And that's really kind of been the mainstay of tumor biology. Okay, and this is what this looks like. And so here's the initiation of inflammation. So here's your normal inflammatory cascade. Okay, and you can see all the main players of the immune cells. And at some point, this progresses to chronic inflammation if the underlying cause of the inflammatory event is not removed or attenuated by the body. And so as this progresses, you can see more and more immune cells become recruited. And here you see an actual dramatic immune reaction. And here it says organization of a tertiary lymphoid organ. And so at some point, the amount of immune cells becomes so great that there actually is a rather intense bona fide immune reaction. And some would call it the production of a tertiary lymphoid structure in a non-lymphoid organ. And so this is in the organ that had the initial inflammatory assault. All right. And this is coming from this review paper, which is another good one. And so if any of you are interested in solid organ transplant or heme, there's a lot of cool references in here. This is my field, and so I have a lot of background material that you might find interesting. And so what we're looking at really is kind of the balance between homeostatic immunity and pathologic immunity. And so in a normal healthy patient, this balance is maintained, and it's in the patients that have diseases, and this is a lot of diseases actually, where you see a pathological immune system being probably a little bit more aggressive or stimulated, and you see the homeostatic immune system being suppressed. Okay, and a lot of this contributes to disease in a wide variety of different pathologies and pathophysiologies. Okay, so to outline what I've done is I stole the target emblem, and so our targets of immunosuppression are going to be these introductory slides, so you can kind of follow along. So their B cell, what I've divided it into are based on cell type, and I think that's probably the easiest. Drugs that target B cells, drugs that target T cells, drugs that are small molecule tyrosine kinase inhibitors, so they target a specific receptor on a whole host of host cells, chemokine and cytokine targets, okay, pro-inflammatory gene, excuse me, targets, and then drugs that alter metabolism, okay. So just, as a review, understand that there's two types of immunity, cellular and humoral. For this lecture, when we talk about cell-mediated immunity, we're really referring to the effector processes of T cells. When we're talking about humoral immunity, we're really referring to the effector processes of B cells, which are largely antibody-mediated. Okay, so what are the disease states? So this lecture is a little bit different because we're not really talking about a specific disease state, we're talking about several, and where these drugs can be useful. Okay, so solid organ transplant is the most obvious. You'd want intense systemic immunosuppression to accomplish or to prevent graft versus host disease. Pathologies that have an autoimmunity or an immune-provoking component, which is actually a lot of them, lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, multiple sclerosis, and then there's obviously a few more. Cancer, of course, the process of angiogenesis itself can be molecularly targeted. Looking at drugs that alter the tumor microenvironment, which is really kind of a fancy way of saying the immune reaction that's occurring here in some of these early stage tumors. This refers to the tumor microenvironment in the literature. I lost my place. And then some of the hematological malignancies, which have a bona fide cell type that we can molecularly target. Okay, and then there are some special instances where we want to have at least some moderate immunosuppression, to basically halt an immune response that could be surmounted against implanted type foreign things. A great example would be cardiac stents. Many of the stents, even the metal stents that are put into the right coronary artery, have some type of immune inhibiting component to it so that you don't have an immune reaction to that foreign particle. Okay, then this is kind of a large overview of kind of where we're going. You can read the figure legend on your own, but essentially what we're looking at is this process of initiation and tumor progression and the recruitment of immune cells that kind of feed into this. And so, I think in a classic immune definition, we always think of the immune system as being beneficial. At least its job would be to prevent tumor growth. In patients that have tumors, however, it's been well documented that the immune system is quite aware that there's a developing tumor and cannot stop it. Okay, and so this is one of the ways in which the tumor kind of changes the immunity phenotype. And so instead of a tumor halting phenotype, you see a tumor promoting phenotype. And that's kind of what happens here. These immune cells become re-educated as this mass progresses and then invades and degrades this basement cellular matrix over here. Okay, and so here's your neoplastic progression. You can click on this link over here, which will take you to a really nice review paper that I'll summarize kind of throughout this lecture. Okay.